Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Obama's announced the deployment of 250 more Special Operations troops to Syria in a move that nearly doubles the U.S. presence in the country. This comes just days after the Obama administration announced 217 more troops would be sent to Iraq to help in the fight against ISIS. President Obama addressed the wars in Syria and Iraq during a speech in Germany.
We continue to make progress, pushing ISIL back from territory that it controlled. And just as I've approved additional support for Iraqi forces against ISIL, I've decided to increase U.S. support for local forces fighting ISIL in Syria.
We'll have more on U.S. involvement in Syria with journalist Seymour Hersh after headlines. Ahead of Obama's visit to Germany, tens of thousands of people took to the streets to protest a massive trade deal between the United States and European Union. Critics say the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, or TTIP, would undermine safety and environmental regulations to serve corporate interests. Organizers said 90,000 people attended the rally in the northern city of Hanover Saturday. Protests continued Sunday.
We should be part of the negotiations. They are creating a second judicial system, sitting in secret rooms with business delegates, deciding behind our backs, and putting governments under pressure with court cases worth billions of dollars because they claim they lose money. That is something which is not okay. And that's why I am totally against TTIP.
Ohio Governor John Kasich and Texas Senator Ted Cruz have announced plans to coordinate their campaigns in an effort to deny frontrunner Donald Trump the Republican presidential nomination. Cruz's campaign says it will focus on the May 3rd primary in Indiana in order to allow Kasich to compete with Trump in Oregon and here in New Mexico. Both Kasich and Cruz are hoping to keep Trump from reaching the threshold of 1,237 delegates needed to secure the nomination before the July convention. If Trump stays below that threshold, it opens a possibility of a contested convention where delegates could switch their votes away from the candidate chosen in their state's primary or caucus after the initial convention ballot. Republican mega-donor Charles Koch has said he could support Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton over a Republican nominee in November. In an interview with ABC News, Koch said he would only support Republican candidates Donald Trump or Ted Cruz if they change certain proposals, including Cruz's vow to carpet bomb ISIS and Trump's plan to ban Muslims from entering the United States. Koch spoke to journalist Jonathan Karl.
Am I hearing you correctly? You think Bill Clinton was a better president than George W. Bush?
Well, in some ways. In other ways, I mean, he wasn't an exemplar.
Yeah.
But as far as the growth of government, the increase in spending on restrictive regulations, it was 2.5 times under Bush that it was under Clinton.
So is it possible another Clinton could be better than another Republican
next
time around?
It's possible.
You couldn't see yourself supporting Hillary Clinton, could you?
Well, we would have to believe her actions would be quite different than her rhetoric. Let me put it that way.
Oil Baron Charles Koch speaking to ABC News. Virginia Democratic Governor Terry McAuliffe has restored voting rights to more than 200,000 felons. Bypassing the Republican legislature, he issued the change through executive order. It'll allow felons who have served their prison time and finished parole or probation to register to vote in time for the November election. Virginia is a key swing state. Most of those affected are African American. 8 members of a single family have been shot to death in rural Ohio. Authorities say 7 adults and a 16-year-old, all members of the Roden family, were shot in the head execution-style, most while they slept. They were killed early Friday at 4 crime scenes within a short distance of each other. Ohio Attorney General Mike DeWine said the shootings were not random.
This was a pre-planned execution of 8 individuals. It was a sophisticated operation. And those who carried it out were trying to do everything that they could do to hinder the investigation and their prosecution.
Meanwhile, in Georgia, a man is suspected of killing 5 people at 2 separate locations, then killing himself as part of what authorities described as a domestic dispute. Wayne Anthony Hawes reportedly killed a number of his wife's relatives after she left him. In a victory for survivors of CIA torture, a federal judge has allowed a lawsuit against the 2 psychologists who designed and implemented the program to move forward. Psychologists James Mitchell and Bruce Jessen reaped more than $80 million for designing torture techniques used by the CIA. The lawsuit was filed on behalf of 2 torture survivors and the family of a 3rd man, Gul Rahman, who froze to death at a CIA black site in Afghanistan. ACLU staff attorney Dror Laden called the judge's decision, quote, an historic win in the fight to hold the people responsible for torture accountable. A court in Saudi Arabia sentenced a human rights activist to 9 years in prison. Amnesty International condemned the sentencing of Issa Ahmed as part of, quote, the Saudi Arabian authorities' ruthless quest to eradicate any last vestige of dissent, unquote. President Obama visited Saudi Arabia for a 4th time last week. Amnesty International has accused the Nigerian military of massacring hundreds of people, burning some alive, and trying to cover up the killings. More than 350 people are believed to have been unlawfully slaughtered by Nigerian soldiers in December during a confrontation between the military and demonstrators with the Islamic movement of Nigeria. In Austria, a far-right candidate has won the first round of the presidential elections after running on an anti-immigrant campaign focusing on the arrival of refugees. It was the best result to date for the far-right Freedom Party in a national election. The party's candidate will face a Green Party-backed candidate in a runoff in May. A group of independent experts have accused the Mexican government of stonewalling their investigation into the disappearance of 43 students in September of 2014. Mexican authorities have claimed police turned the students over to drug gang members who killed them and incinerated their bodies. But the experts appointed by the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights concluded there was no such burning. The experts also found evidence state, federal, and military personnel were present on the night of the disappearance, and evidence that suspects whose confessions were used to bolster the government's account were tortured. The experts said they faced obstacles from the Mexican government, including the withholding of documents and even a retaliatory criminal probe into one of the officials who appointed the panel. In Washington, D.C., Antonio Tizapa, the father of one of the missing students, joined a demonstration support of the panel. He spoke to Democracy Now! By phone.
It's not a protest. It's a major show of support for this great work that they have done. This is a way to show gratitude and express our support so they continue, so they see we have confidence in them, because we don't have confidence in the government.
A guard at a private immigrant detention center in Pennsylvania will go to prison for admitting he sexually assaulted a 19-year-old Honduran woman. Daniel Sharkey is the first worker at a family detention center to be convicted of institutional sexual assault, despite previous reports of sexual abuse in such facilities. He's been sentenced to 6 to 23 months in prison. There's a chance he'll serve less time than his victim and her 3-year-old son spent in detention after fleeing abuse in Honduras. One of the first people to file a lawsuit in connection with the water poisoning crisis in Flint, Michigan, has been shot to death. Sasha Ivana Bell said her child had been poisoned with lead after an emergency manager appointed by Governor Rick Snyder switched Flint's water to the corrosive Flint River. Bell was one of 2 women found shot to death last week at a townhouse. She was 19 years old. And family and friends of Samuel Harrell plan to conclude their 5-day hunger strike at a rally in Harlem today after marking the first anniversary of Harrell's death. Harrell was an African-American man who died after as many as 20 corrections officers kicked, punched, and threw him down a flight of stairs while he was incarcerated at the Fishkill Correctional Facility in Beacon, New York. At a vigil near the prison, his sister, Sarisa, spoke out about why she and others are on hunger strike.
The reason for the hunger strike is to give up. We're willing to not eat, to give, to get something in return. And what we want in return is justice. It's been a year. Nothing has happened. Does it hurt? It hurts a lot. Do I think about it? Every day. Do I forget about him? Never.
Samuel Harrell's supporters have demanded reforms, including body cameras for corrections officers. They say all the corrections officers involved in Harrell's death remain on active duty. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.